All right, welcome back. And in this second part of this video, we're gonna be talking about liquids a bit. So in the first part, we covered some wall materials and a bit of the ceiling materials as well. It's almost the same thing. But now in the second part, we're gonna cover a bit about liquid materials, right? So what is a liquid material? Well, basically everyone knows what is a liquid material, right? So you can create water material, so things like orange juice, wine, alcohol, all sorts of alcohol, for example, and either more thicker liquids like paint and all of that kind of stuff, right? So we're gonna obviously cover a couple of them because you can spend hours and hours creating materials. In the beginning, I'm going to keep it really simple, which is we're going to create some the most primitive water material, which is going to be a pure crystal clear water, right? So water is kind of similar to glass, right? So I already created a glass material video, so please do check that out. It's going to be quite similar, but not really, right? So first of all, we're going to create a really simple water material, and next we're going to start experimenting with translucency. Now, how translucency works in water materials and, glass, plastic, whatever, but obviously we're covering water right now, or liquid, right? So for example, I'm going to show you a quick example of a clear, crystal clear water, which is going to be, you can name it shallow water or whatever, just clear, clean water, right? So let's just say this is your clean water there. So obviously you can see that it's completely transparent or refractive, right? So you can see everything clear through it, right? So this water doesn't have any dirty molecules or any dirty bits or dirt bits or something like that into it floating. So basically the water becomes really clear from any dirt or anything like that. So basically you will see through the water really clearly, and thus the light rays will go through the water really clearly and in a precise way, right? And so I have another example, which is, for example, dirty water glass or whatever. So I did open this image. This is a 2.4K resolution image, and as you can see on the left side, you see a glass of water. And the water is completely clear, right? It's a crystal clear water. You can see through it really clearly, and obviously that's the light ray is gonna come, for example, from there or from there, doesn't matter. So but the light ray is gonna come in through the glass, through the water, inside of the water, right? And the ray is gonna go straight through the water, because there's nothing's gonna be that would block the light ray or the light rays. And the rays are gonna come through the glass, through the water surface, and through the glass surface into the the exterior bit. So if you would put an object here somewhere and the direct light there, that object shadow there should be quite sharp. Now let's just move to the right side, which, as you can see here, this water is kind of dirty, right? And obviously you can spot bits floating in the water. So you have really big, thick, dirty bits or whatever there are. I just call it bits, molecules, whatever, right? Now on the a bit above, you can see that those details, those bits there, are becoming more smaller. And obviously in the middle it becomes even more smaller, and on the top the bits, as you can see, it's more refractive, right? So it's more translucent as well. And we're going to talk about translucence, what it is and how it works, obviously in a simple way. But as you can see here on the top, the details, that those bits are a lot more smaller, and the water here, it looks much more clear, right? So this area here is quite dark and this area is quite light, just because all the heavy bits are basically they sank down on the bottom of the glass, right? So how translucency is working, right? So obviously you can find an explanation here or on Wikipedia or Google, whatever, right? So if you want to read about this, is the physical property of allowing light to pass through the material without being scattered, blah blah blah, right? So if you want to take a look into this, please do. I'm not gonna spend time reading, you know, all of this kind of thing, but basically I'm gonna try this to summarize in a really simple and primitive way, but I think you're gonna get the idea, right? So, so for example, here as well, you have a lot of molecules here, and you have the direct light, right? And the light is going into that object or that material, as in, for example, water or dirty water, and that light scatters through each and every molecule, right? Hitting the molecule, and obviously those molecules are blocking the light, etc., etc. So I will show you just in a sec, you know, how this works, and obviously. Another thing is a studio light. So I will be talking about this as well. How does it work, right? So it's kind of the same-ish thing. So I'm gonna be obviously comparing, and obviously, as you should know, water will have an IOR number of 1.33, which is at 20 degrees Celsius, right? So just keep that in mind. Obviously, the IOR will change a bit when it's going to be frosted or something like that at 0 degrees, but for a generic water, crystal clear, pure water at, for example, 20 degrees Celsius, that's going to be your IOR is going to be 133. And that's how you should always apply IOR on water, right? Now, I'm going to show you a really quick, well, maybe not quick, but a graph on Photoshop, how, you know, crystal clear water works, and how obviously translucency works on a dirty water or painted or dyed with some, you know, powder or something like that, right? So I'm gonna create a new layer. I'm gonna pick my brush and I'm gonna draw a piece of glass, right? So let's just say this is your glass and this is your water, right? So this is your water, and let's just say this this water is completely clear, right? So what I mean clear is clear of any dirt, any chemicals, like literally clear water. Obviously it will have some minerals which are going to be microscopical, small, and you know the human eye is not going to even spot it, right? But you know, let's just not go, you know, too deep. So basically what happens with a fully transparent or refractive water is basically your light ray, right? Your light ray is coming in, right? It's hitting the glass, it's going through the glass surfaces and hitting the, obviously, your water, right? So obviously the ray is gonna basically break, and the ray should come in at almost the same angle, right? That's how water should look. It doesn't work, you know, completely correctly in these render engines, but obviously you can manipulate in whatever way you want. But let's just get back to this approach, right? So let's just say, you know, keep it simple. So the ray is going through the crystal clear water with no bits, no dirt, anything, like crystal clear, pure water, right? So the light ray is gonna come in, is gonna come in into the water, and basically it's gonna go through really easily. Nothing is gonna be blocking the light, and the light is gonna go through the glass piece again and basically hit your exterior, the table or something like that, right? So even if you would have an object here, right? So let's just say this kind of a box or something like that, right? And for example, it's gonna hit that box or whatever, and that shadow is gonna be quite clear and quite crisp on the other side of the glass, just because this water was so clear and nice and pure that, you know, nothing was blocking the light. So you should get that box you know, shadow quite crisp, right? So quite sharp. It shouldn't be blurred out completely or diffused. So just keep that in mind. So this is how crystal clear water is working. So it doesn't give you, it will not give you any translucency in it unless you have some chemical bits in it or dirt or anything like that. Now I'm going to show you how a dirty water or chemically you know, changed water or liquid is gonna work with translucency, right? So only then the translucency is gonna, you know, do its job. So I'm gonna hide this layer, and I'm gonna create another layer, and I'm gonna create, you know, the same glass, right? So this is water, right? And now I'm gonna create, you know, small dots. So those small dots, is going to represent your dirty molecules or bits floating in your water, right? So which is dirt or sand or whatever it is, right? Even if you're going to pour a lot of salt, a lot of unrefined salt into your water will become quite whitish or tinted white or whatever, right? It's going to become a bit more like a milky water, right? So let's just say you have a lot of those molecules, microscopic molecules, or really small molecules that you can see with the magnifying glass floating around in your water, right? But those details, those bits are really small. And let's just say the color is some kind of like a sandy color, right? So a bit more brownish and lightish, that rather than just black. So let's just say your light ray is gonna hit the glass and obviously enter your water, and this is what's gonna happen. So basically your ray is gonna hit one molecule, another molecule, and another, and basically it's gonna be like a web, right? Basically it's gonna be like a something like a nuclear explosion, right? So that one molecule can scatter that light in every direction, right? Now it's gonna hit another molecule and it's gonna scatter in sorts of different directions, and that's gonna happen throughout your water material, right? So basically your light ray or light rays are gonna be hitting each and every molecule and basically scattering that light, diffusing that light inside of your water or liquid material, right? So another thing is, the more rare the molecules are gonna be, right, the more translucency you're gonna less translucency you're gonna get on your liquid material. Now and obviously it's going to be more clearer, right? Now the more dense the molecules will be, right? So close to each other, right? So basically your translucency will be less and less visible, right? So for example, it's going to be less and less visible. So for example, your molecules, your bits in your water are going to be, for example, a darker material like grayish or blackish. And let's just say it's going to be so dense in the water that when your ray is going to hit, right, maybe your ray is going to be only, able to make that translucency happen in the beginning of your glass piece, which is going to be, let's just say 0.5 centimeters, right? So let's just say the radius is going to be something along those lines, right? So something along those lines, right? So everything here in the middle after 0.5 centimeters, it's going to be dark, right? It's going to be almost completely black. And in the middle, obviously it's going to be a gradient, right? So it's going to be lighter translucency, darker translucency, and then the translucency is going to die inside of it, just because the translucency effect is going to die just because your molecules, your bits in the water are so dense and dark that basically it's going to block the light completely, right? So you have to keep in mind that that's how translucency is working. So basically if your water is dirty or has some chemical compounds in it, so microscopical molecules, whatever, that is blocking the light, right? That's when you're gonna start seeing translucency in your objects, in your materials, right? So for example, I'm gonna show you one of my previews. So for example, I made these materials for you guys. So let's just say, you have in the back, you have a clear glass, as you can see there. You have a darker glass, obviously you see less through it, but this is a clear approach. I didn't use any, translucency in it, any compound, any chemical or anything like that, right? I'm just basically talking about as an example, right? So let's just say, I made this glass piece which had some, you know, some imperfections in the you know, in the purity of that liquid that was made into glass or whatever, right? And or for example plastic, doesn't matter, right? So basically, you know, this material has some bits, some imperfections in those molecules, in that structure of it, right? Obviously, for me, it's a bit hard to explain because my English is not the best, but I'm trying to obviously make a point here for you guys. So basically, if you know, if that compound was changed by, you know, some chemical, a different chemical compound, or some powder or something was mixed into the compound, obviously your liquid is not going to be completely pure and crystal clear, and in that case it's going to start giving you this translucency effect. So the more denser the molecules are going to be and the more darker they're going to be, your object is going to be less and less translucent, right? So you are going to see translucency only maybe on the edges of your object, right? So for example, like this object, right? So if you zoom in, you can see that only on the edges, maybe 1, 2, 3 centimeters. By the way, this ball is here, is 1 meter in diameter, right? Keep that in mind in regards of the scale. So I'm scattering only like 5 centimeters from the edge. You can see the translucency working quite well, and then obviously the translucency dies. Now, for example, marble, obviously marble is a stone, and obviously some stones are a bit more translucent, some are a bit less translucent, but obviously in VRay you can control this in whatever way you want. So for example, if I'm gonna go to plastics, obviously you can see that, you know, some of them are more clearer, some are more denser, right? So the molecules, for example, in here are more denser, and that's why you're getting less translucency in it. And obviously here you can see that we're manipulating this on the edges only, and inside it was quite dark, and obviously you have another material there that it's only on the edges, etc, etc, etc. And even this plastic bit, as you can see, it's translucent as well. Obviously that plastic bed is completely solid, it's simple, it's fast to render, but this is using translucency, and this is how it works, right? So, you know, you can use VRay material translucency, or you can use VRay fast SSS too, right? So I'm gonna close this window, so you will be able to obviously get these and support my channel. So I'm gonna explain one more thing, which is going to be the studio lighting setup, right? So for example, if I'm going to go to my Google tab there, so how this is working in a kind of similar way, which is, for example, you have the reflector, an umbrella, whatever you want to call it, and you have a light bulb, right? So that light bulb, if without this white fabric bit, this light bulb is going to cast a light, right, onto your scene, and your shadows, your lighting is going to be quite sharp, right? So for example, you have your umbrella there, right? And you have your bulb. Let's just say it's casting the light, right? And this is your object, let's just say a bulb, and obviously you're gonna get a really sharp shadow, and you're gonna have a really sharp highlight somewhere there, right? And obviously that highlight is gonna be disappearing a bit, and that bit is gonna be the darkest bit, right? Now, if you are going to put a piece of fabric material, or whatever material is going to be, you know, threaded. So how fabric materials are made, obviously they're, you know, fabric is usually made from threads, right? So if you have like, you know, thousands and thousands and billions and millions and billions and billions of threads, right? Going like that, right? And obviously they're so thin that the light is going through them and scattering inside of you know, these threads. So, and that's why, you know, the whole fabric material will be really diffused, right? It's going to be like a white, as you can see here, it's going to be like a white, nice diffused light. And what's going to happen with your object, basically, you're not going to get that massive, harsh, ugly highlight, but you're going to get a really nice, well lit object with a even lighting and even shadows, and the shadows are not going to become sharp anymore. They're going to become really, really even, or really, really blurred, right? Really, really subtle shadows. So the lighting is going to become really, really nice, right? It's like the same thing with clouds, right? When you have overcast, so for example, you have sun shining in the sky, right? Happy face, there we go. Whoop. Happy face with one teeth. And let's just say, you're standing there, bam, 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 and obviously nothing is blocking the light, right? So you're gonna get a really nice sharp shadow of yourself, right, on the ground. Now if you're gonna have clouds, or literally the whole surface of the sky is gonna be cloudy, right, a layer of clouds, basically what clouds are gonna do is the sun rays are gonna come into the clouds, and those clouds are gonna be scattering that light throughout, right? The light is gonna be scattered like a lightning, right, everywhere in those molecules, right? So basically the whole sky is gonna become like a skylight, like a massive big light, and that light is gonna be really subtle and smooth, right? So you're not gonna get that shadow anymore. Actually, you're just gonna get like a really smooth shadow around you, or a really smooth shadow, on the side or something like that. But the thing is, you're not gonna see your sharp shadow anymore, because it's gonna be so smooth. The lighting is gonna be so smooth and even, and that's how it's basically working. That's how the scattering, the translucency effect is working, right? You can even get this with clouds, plastics, marble, stone, marble and stone materials, etc., etc. So this is how the scattering effect is basically working. The light is hitting something, an object that is blocking the light, but that object molecules are so, for example, rear from each other, or the distance is quite big from each other, so you're gonna get a much more greater translucency, right? So that object is gonna basically glow up or something like that. Now the more the molecules are denser, the less translucency you're gonna start seeing. And obviously if the object is completely pure, so no clouds at all, or a clear glass of clear water, you're not gonna get any translucency in it. And that's gonna be with every object in the world, right? So if it has some imperfections in the structure of it, obviously you're gonna start getting some translucency, right? If it's completely clear, you're not gonna see it. So I hope this made a bit of sense. If you have any more questions in regards of this, please guys leave me a comment. I will try to explain it again or show an example, but we're gonna do that now, right? So how to create this kind of thing with VRay. So it's kind of easy. You just need to experiment with this a bit, and basically just to see how real materials are acting in the real world, right? So for example, if you have a piece of glass, fill it with water, put it on your table, and just try to analyze it, feel it, see it, how it reacts to the light and everything else, right? So that's how you usually start creating materials. So so in my opinion, I think that this dummy ball is not gonna work for us to see the water material really well, just because usually you're gonna fill something with water, so a glass, a vase with flowers, all of that kind of stuff, right? So I think this is not gonna do for us any justice, okay? So I modeled an object, so I'm gonna delete this guy, right? So I'm gonna delete this guy. So as you can see, the square is 1 meter by 1 meter. So I did model a glass. Obviously, I'm not gonna show you how I did it. It's really simple. I'm just gonna quickly explain, what to do. But so you can model a glass using a lathe approach. So for example, you have a if you go here, so for example, and if you would do something like this, this, that, and that, for example, right? So basically a profile. If it could, yeah, there you go. So you know, you can use the Leaf modifier. You can create a glass like that. There you go. So then you can control the Z, X, Y, whatever. And then obviously you can control the axis. So for example, this is my glass, there we go. So you want it to weld, right? To weld the core. So let's weld the core. Bam. So that didn't weld, but just a bit more. There you go. Now you always need to check the normals a bit, right? So if you're using the lathe, there we go. So sometimes the lathe weld is not working really well. So if the normals are flipped, you can flip it. You can use more segments. So 60 segments, for example, you know, you can create from lathe modifier as well. And usually if the core is not gonna weld, I would weld this by, you know, doing this manually. For example, weld, increase the number a bit, and, you know, you can do something like that. So basically you're gonna end up with 1 point, right? So check this out as well. I'm not a big fan of using lathe unless I really need to. It's really important to know what exactly will you need later on, right? Usually how I did model this glass is really easy. Is basically from a cylinder, right? From a cylinder, I inset down, and basically then I put a bit more detail. I bend that in, and obviously applied some edges, and then turbo smooth, right? And how I did extract the water out. So for example, materials, enable transparency, there you go. So then I extracted the water bit from the same material, and I pushed. What the most important thing is that you need to push or intersect your water object with your glass object. So if I'm gonna go to the top view, you need to intersect your water model with your glass model. So basically it has to go through it a bit, like maybe 0.001 centimeters, or it has to intersect with the glass material. It cannot be shrinked down. So basically this water material is not going to be touching the glass model. So just please do know that. And obviously I created some bubbles, scattered them around, and I did put some my logo balls from the studio scene. So I think it's gonna work quite well. And obviously I unwrapped this water model, and I put this is some kind of a, you know, radial bump map of the water or whatever, and basically I just blurred it out, and that's about it. So it's quite easy setup. Obviously it did took a bit of time to experiment with it, but I hope that this will be a good model for testing water, because I think that's going to be quite important. So I'm just going to copy this guy, and we're going to paste this in our dummy scene here. There we go. So the size is going to be like this. We're not going to make it bigger. I think the size is going to work just fine. So, or maybe not. Or maybe not. So let's just change the size a bit. I'm gonna move this here somewhere. There we go. And let's just increase the size a bit. Something like that. That's more than enough, right? So this is 1 meter, and this is, you know, this glass is quite massive, right? So obviously keep that in mind, right? And the next thing I want to do is actually ungroup this guy completely. Okay, so I'll be able to select everything, right? So now I'm gonna make a selection set because it's gonna be easier, and obviously I'm gonna make a new save on my desktop, which is gonna be material test solid, and I'm gonna call this liquid, right? There we go, save. And I'm gonna make this water selection there, and I'm gonna call it water into my selection set, right? And then the other thing I want to do is touch the bubbles. So bubbles, right? So then I can, you know, if I need to select really quickly, right? So I can do bubbles, or I can do water. Just keep that in mind. So it's really useful, especially when you need to go through and through, right? So for the glass, so ignore all of these materials. These are all the wall materials that we created. So I'm just gonna go down, and we're gonna try to experiment with these kind of things with the materials, right? So the glass material is quite easy. Obviously, I did made a video about it. So the glass material is quite easy. You know, number one there, reflection 220, IOR 1.6 for water. That's more than enough. Sorry, for glass, and reflection 220, refraction 250 because I want to see it through. And for the max depth, for reflection and refraction, we're going to use 5 and 5 for now, unless we're going to need to experiment with that a bit later on. So that's the glass material, and I'm using a bit of the fog material, which is a bit more greenish bluish, on 0.04, and that's it. And GGX, that's all for the glass material. Now I'm going to show you how I did create a water material, right? So I'm going to select my water, and this is going to be the most simplest water. So now you can ignore this bump map because it's not important. It's just giving this a bit more nicer detail on the top of it, which is going to be like a ripple effect. So you can Google a ripple effect water bump map or whatever. You will find those maps. And basically what I did, I plugged it into VRay color to bump because it does enhance it a bit, and it's going to be working a bit better. And as you can see here, where is it? So as you can see here, I'm using a blur value of 5, and I'm using sum of the area, which is going to be, obviously sum of the area is using a bit more information from the texture, especially in the distance. It does work a bit better, right? None is a bit slow, too slow. Well, not a bit. It's slower by a bit because it doesn't apply any filtering, right? So anyways, you can use pyramidical or sum of the area. I was talking about these filters thousands of times, so please do check that out. And this is the water material. So how you create a water material is basically this. So I'm going to create a new water material, and we're going to jump back to this one because, you know, it's just a bump map there, nothing special. And the bump map is at the moment at 10. By default is 30 on VRay. So this is your water material. Look, so check it out how I'm gonna create it. So basically you want to apply a crystal clear water, right? So I usually put this to 1 or 2. So in this case, I'm gonna put this to 1. So for the reflection, I'm gonna put 200 because I don't want to be for water to be that much reflective in my case. 5 here for the max depth, and for the refraction I'm going to use 250, right? So it's almost completely refractive, right? It's the maximum color is 255, but I never use the minimum 0 and the maximum 255 color. Usually go, you know, close to that. There we go. And as you can see, that's your water material, right? Well, not really, because we're using 1.6. That's almost like a glass, right? So we need to crank this down to 3.3. Bam, there you go. So this is your water material here, and this is exactly the same material as this one. I'm just using a bump map into the bump slot here, and I'm applying this on here, right? But for the bubbles, because I'm using a different ID here just for the bump, because I did unwrap this, but just ignore the unwrapping, just, you know, concentrate on the material first. So if I'm gonna select the bubbles are using the same material as this one. So literally I just dragged and dropped here, and I just unplugged the bump map and I applied this on the bubbles, right? But ignore the bubbles as well, because that's not the main thing at the moment, right? So I'm gonna delete that. So the water is there. So that's your water material, and obviously I called it simple water crystal clear, right? So obviously that water is applied, and I'm going to right click on my plane because I want to render this in unrenderable. So black is going to be visible more, as you can see here. So for example, if I'm going to press the interactive mode, there we go. So this is our glass of water. And so now look what's going to happen if I'm going to click display as, renderable here. Obviously the effect is going to be there, but it's not going to be that visible, right? And obviously water will deform things outside, right? So the refractions are gonna be quite deformed, right? So obviously you can see the bump nest here, so I'm using just a bump map. So I'm not using a displacement. So the bump map is kind of a, you know, a fake-ish result, but displacement is gonna be, you know, working a bit more better. But the thing is, we're rendering this from so far away, it, you know, you can barely see it. So in this case, I want you to see, you know, a bit more contrast into the water. So I'm gonna apply renderable off. There you go. So now you can spot how the water is working, right? So obviously I'm rendering on my Potato CPU, which is a 10-core CPU, 20 threads. So, you know, if you want to skip it through, you can, but obviously sometimes I have to say some important things. So I wouldn't recommend skipping my video too much. So there you go. So you have your glass material, and that water is intersecting with that glass material or overlapping the glass object, right? So your water shouldn't be, you know, in front of the glass, right? There shouldn't be a gap between your water object and your glass object. The water should overlap with your glass object, or it should be extruded or pushed out with a push modifier inside of the glass object. So just keep that in mind, all right? Because I remember in the beginning I was creating a water material in a glass, and obviously I thought, okay, I need to shrink this water down a bit just to make a tiny small gap, right, in between the glass and water, and that worked out really bad. All right, so there you go. VRay gives you some diffraction effects here, and I think we can put this to 20. I just want to reduce this effect a bit, right? Length 20, and maybe this one 10. Okay, I think that's gonna work perfectly fine, right? So VRay did introduce a lot of nice, you know, effects there, but you know, don't over exaggerate them, because I'm just basically pointing this out, and it's really nice that it's giving us this diffraction effect, right? Because I think it does give us realism. All right, so this is our water effect, all right, which is a really simple water effect. And by the way, I'm always rendering this in IPR mode. There you go. I'm gonna keep it like this. Okay. So now what I'm gonna do is basically just keep in mind I'm always gonna be using this this effect here. So sorry, this bump map, right? So ignore the bump map, but I'm gonna be always using. So without the bump map, this is what you're gonna get. You're basically what you're gonna get is a flat water, right? There we go. This is gonna be really flat. So now with the bump map, you're gonna get this, right? So obviously I can make it smaller for you guys. For example, 5, you know, just a subtle effect, right? There we go, right? So that's gonna be, I think, more than enough. So now what we can do, so this is water, right? So now what we can do is apply another material, right? So I'm copying the water material, right, with all the presets. And I'm gonna apply this onto my object, which is my obviously water object. And I'm gonna press, what I'm gonna do now is basically put some color into refraction. So now you can add this in you know, a lot of different ways. So for example, refraction, right? I want to put this to greenish water, right? Or for example, sorry, reddish water, something like that, right? So I'm gonna apply that, and I'm gonna apply this. Bam. So you're getting this reddish water. Obviously we are rendering this on the black background, so now it's really hard to see what color is the water, right? So let's just put this to renderable. There we go. So this is what we're getting now. So we just put some color onto the refraction, and this is what we're getting, right? So now look what's gonna happen. So sorry, I'm just gonna put this off completely. Put it there so you will see it a bit better. Make it smaller maybe. There we go. So so I'm gonna change this. Look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna change this to a darker, darker, and darker, and you know it's basically almost unrefractive, right? Saturation, blah blah blah, and you know I wouldn't put this to you know a completely red color, but always remove the intensity a bit down just to give a more realistic result, right? All right, now this is really important. So obviously it really depends what you're trying to create. What you're trying to create is maybe it's some kind of a juice or you know something like that. I really don't know, but I'm just gonna basically experimenting and showing you how this material is gonna react in different ways, right? So I'm gonna repeat myself, please ignore this bump map. It doesn't do anything much, just giving me this bump map, right? So ignore the bump map completely. You're creating just a water material, right? So look what's gonna happen now if I'm gonna click this to a refraction of 250 and completely white. And now look what's gonna happen when I'm gonna start playing. So I'm not playing with any translucency yet. It's a completely transparent or refractive water material, right? So look what's gonna happen now when I'm gonna start playing with the fog color, right? So that's how you should start applying color to your water material, because that's you know it's gonna give you like a fog, like a depth basically to your material. So look what's gonna happen now if I'm gonna apply this to red, right? So look, so this is now red, right? And the fog color will work a lot better with you know with colors. I wouldn't experiment, so I can't. So okay, I'm gonna show you an example. So let's just say this is a red color there, right? So no, look what's gonna happen. So obviously you are you know limiting the refraction there, right? You're limiting the refraction, you're killing it, the refraction, you're killing it, right? But obviously it was 250, right? So now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna change this color to let's just say green, right? You're starting to get really weird effects, right? Obviously, which is not correct, okay? So it looks kind of weird. It looks like red here, greenish there, and it just give us a really weird looking effect, right? So I wouldn't control refraction color. I would control the fog color because it will work just perfectly fine, right? Now, another pointer that I want to make is, so for example, I'm going to make this white again. Okay, so I want to show you one more thing. I'm going to show you a lot of things, but I'm just trying to make a point there, how you can play around with the water, right? So let's just say, keep the reflection on, right? The reflection, we need the reflection on, right? But now look what's going to happen if I'm going to change the diffuse color from blackish to, for example, 150. Bam. There we go. So we are getting a less contrasty water, and at the same time it does look a bit more realistic, right? So this water doesn't look that crystal clear anymore. And how you can obviously manipulate with this, and keep in mind when I'm applying this sorry for the bubbles, but if I'm gonna basically do this now, look, so if I'm gonna play this, do this, and I'm gonna select my bubbles, and I'm gonna apply this color again, right? Sorry. No, I don't want to rename it. Jesus, come on. All right, there we go. So I apply the same bubble, the same water material on the bubbles, but bubbles will not have this bump map, right? There we go. And this is what you're getting now here, right? There we go. Now I can apply on the bubbles. I can apply if I want the same thing right there. But the thing is, I usually would not do that because let's just say, you know, I'm gonna apply some kind of UVs or something like that, and you know, it's gonna pick up that bump map. So I cannot even, I don't really need to collapse them together now, because I don't want to, you know, experiment with that too much. So what I'm gonna do in this case for you guys, for easier to understand, I'm gonna select the bubbles, I'm gonna select the water, and I'm gonna group them, right? I'm gonna group them. So I'm gonna apply the same material, so just not to confuse you too much, right? There we go. So obviously my bump map is on a second channel. So this is on the second channel unwrapped, and those bubbles are still on channel 1, so they shouldn't pick this color unless I'm gonna collapse them together, right? There you go. So if I'm gonna apply this darker water here now, so you can see how crystal clear this thing is getting, right? So now I'm gonna apply this. Sorry, this is not updating correctly. So if I'm gonna stop it, I'm gonna press I'm not sure why is it rendering red. Come on, VRay, you can do it. All right, let me reopen it. It doesn't want to render it. All right, there you go. I don't know why it didn't work. I did press U letter. So U letter is basically to update the preview, right? Okay, there you go. I think that should be working now. So I'm gonna press render again. So I'm gonna apply the same material now. Bam, there we go. So this is so this water looks a bit more whitish and a bit more natural, right? And let's just say I'm gonna put this even more to the test, right? So what I mean to the test more is basically I'm gonna remove the refraction a bit. So the water will become whiter and whiter, right? So if I'm gonna put this to 200, there you go. So this is how you can manipulate, you know, a fast effect with this water, but just using, you know, not using any translucency in it. So this water looks like it's translucent a bit, and it should be, because you're trying to, you know, you're trying to manipulate that, you know, a bit of a dirty water. So, you know, it looks like you mix some salt or you put a tablet or something like that, right? And this is what you're, you know, starting to get into your water, right? So, so in this case, I'm gonna put this to 100, and I'm gonna put this to 200. So obviously it's gonna be a bit whiter. So if I'm gonna apply this one is gonna be crystal clear, as you can see there, right? A massive contrast. And if I'm gonna apply this guy, the water is gonna become a bit more lighter and whiter, right? So now I'm gonna select. So this was simple water, crystal clear, and that's gonna be honestly just water version 2, because I don't really want to mess with names, because that's gonna take too much time. All right, so I'm just gonna cancel the render now, and we're gonna copy this material there, and we're gonna rename it. So that's gonna be water version 2, and that's gonna be water version 3. All right, so that's going to be water version 3, and we're going to start experimenting with some colors, right? So I'm going to first put this to renderable, because we want to see that color, and we want to see the color of I don't know, some kind of a drink that would make sense. Some purple drink, no, some red drink. So let's just say red, right? So I'm going to apply that there, and we're going to click render. Bam, there we go, right? So we are rendering this guy here, and now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna put this to a black color. Obviously, we're gonna get more contrast, as you can see there, and it really depends what you're trying to achieve. And a bit less contrast, so you see that the water becomes a bit more whiter. But in this case, we're gonna use maybe 4, right? So a bit more contrasty, but not too much, right? There we go. So now look what we can do with these colors, right? So we can make it really dark, sorry, really light, really darkish, and you can see how it's nicely, obviously changing the. So you know this, it's kind of looking like more like a juice, right? Like a really chemical cheap juice that you can find in shops for uh, for not a lot of money, right? So let's just say something like that, right? So obviously we can change the color, blah 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 blah, right? So I'm gonna pick this to red for now, and let's just say we can control this even with 0.2, you know, make it more subtle. 0.1, you know, so we're getting less and less of that effect. 0.05, right? See how shallow it becomes on edges, right? So you can really nicely manipulate with the fog multiplier and obviously the fog bias, but we will go to the fog bias just in a sec. I will show you how it's working in the scene. So there you go. You're getting that nice effect only on the edges, right? So you're kind of controlling the distance, the depth of this effect, right? So there you go. Let's just render that area there. So as you can see, this is getting better and better, right? So let's just say I want to make this darker a bit. Maybe something like that, don't know. So it really depends what kind of a result are you looking for. But you know, overall, this should work quite well. There you go, cheap juice. And let's just say, if I'm gonna put to 0, bam, that's gonna become white, right? So if I'm gonna put 0.005, you know, this is what you're gonna get, and you're gonna, you know, start increasing the number, increasing the number, increasing the number, increasing, right? And let's just say I want to put this to 2. Bam, there you go. So this is you know, how dark and how dense that juice is, right? There you go. And I'm not saying that it doesn't look nice. It does look quite cool, but you know, you can experiment with it a bit more. So 0.5, right? So let's just say we're gonna put 0.5 for now, and let's just say we want to play around a bit with the contrast, right? So look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna increase the bias. So I'm gonna put this to 1. Okay, so it did became you know, a lot lighter, right? So the fog effect did became a lot lighter. So now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna put -1. Bam, that's, you know, that's really intense, right? So if I'm gonna control this now to 0.5, so now you see how it's reacting, right? So you're controlling in between fog multiplier and you're controlling the fog bias as well. So the fog bias, what it is basically a contrast for this effect, right? So the darker are gonna become darker, the darker areas are gonna become darker, more foggy, or you know, a stronger effect, and the lighter colors will become a bit lighter just because you're increasing that contrast, right? So you can really play around with this effect, right? So if I'm going to put this to 1, that's obviously going to be a full you know, effect. So if I'm going to put this to 0.3, sorry, 0.005, this is what we're going to get. And let's just say I'm going to remove this to 0.5. This is what we're getting now. And you can really play around. So there is no right or wrong, right? What you're trying to do here is you're trying to make this look as realistic as possible to your reference image, or to your reference object that you have in your hands or on your table, whatever, doesn't matter. But basically what you're trying to do here is try to make that object look exactly the same, right? So for example, this is a cheap juice, right? So I will increase this to maybe 1, or maybe 0.5. Let's try that. Nope. 0.8. So let's just say something like that, or 5. It's a bit too dark. 1.06. All right, I think I'm kind of happy, or happyish with this effect here. Try to desaturate a bit maybe. So literally just you need to really experiment with this, right? 0.8. 0.5. Actually 8 was working quite well. 1. So something like that. And obviously control the, if you're gonna control the color there, please don't do it. Obviously you can get really weird and I don't know, maybe nice effects, I'm not sure, but you can add a bit more reddish if you want, or something like that, for example. But it really depends what you're trying to get here, right? So obviously this doesn't look really realistic maybe, but you can apply this is gonna be working like a fog color, and this is gonna be working as your refraction color in a way. So you're kind of like I said, there's no right or wrong really, unless you're doing really wrong things. But don't try to over exaggerate with these kind of colors, right? So let's just say I'm gonna keep this to 250, right? So a bit of something like that, and let's just say I want to introduce a bit of that on the edges, for example, right? When the fog color is basically not working really well, right? Or reducing itself. So for example, I can add a bit of red, right? And I can do things even like that, right? But like I said, if this effect is not giving you realistic things, like for example these bubbles look quite weird. So now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna use a whitish material. So this for me looks a lot more realistic, right? Because obviously you shouldn't get those reddish bubbles on the edges, because they're so thin that you're not gonna even see that color, right? So just keep that in mind. They're so thin that you're not gonna even see that. So obviously that area there is so thin and so narrow, and this area here is so thick and deep. So basically that's why that color is getting more and more darker, right? So let's just say this is a cheap juice, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know. Let's try to experiment with this a bit more maybe. So I'm gonna copy this number and put this to 1, and I'm gonna put this 1 there. All right, so it's really dark. I'm not a big fan, honestly. 5 or 0.05, and let's just say minus 0.4. I'm gonna use 2. So let's just see if we're gonna get something on those. As you can see, we're narrowing that effect here, but obviously on the sides it's quite dark. Let us reduce this effect even more. There you go, something like that maybe. Let's just check it out now. And put it, nah, I wouldn't put maybe 3. There you go, a bit lighter maybe. So really play around with these colors, right? So play around with these colors because it's really important. And obviously play around with the refraction. If you want less refraction, you can do that. That's not a big deal. But for the refraction, I would keep it quite refractive, because the effect is going to be a lot more stronger and more realistic, so I say. So there you go. So this looks like maybe like a wine, maybe like a cheap cherry juice that you buy for $1 or something like that. And yeah, that's about it in regards of this material for now. So let us create another material, which is going to be called version 4, and we're going to just apply a different color variation, right? Or we're gonna apply that onto our water, and we will change this to a different color, actually, maybe something like I don't know, maybe something like this. Not even sure what I'm seeing here, but some weird, something like that maybe. And obviously now we can try to, different colors, different hues, different lightness are gonna give you different effects, right? So for example, this greenish thing, whatever it is, right? There we go. So just play around with these settings, but obviously I just showed you how to manipulate with this, right? And with the max def, obviously experiment with this if you really need to, right? So if you're seeing some black bits or black other objects refractions at the end of it, increase this number really gently. But usually 5 and 5 will work perfectly fine. Now keep in mind that VRay is faster on this kind of thing than, for example, Corona, just because, for example, Corona is using a global max depth, which is, for example, you can access it, override depth, and basically type here 25. So literally your scene is gonna render a lot slower, but obviously the refractions and the reflections are gonna be more intense and more accurate, right? So you're gonna get more bounces for the refractions and reflections, but obviously you're gonna have to have a decent machine to render that, right? So there you go. This is some kind of a green elixir there, whatever it is, right? And you can control the reflection if you want less of it or whatever you want to do there, right? I wouldn't put this to glossiness 0.8 or something like that, because we're trying to create a transparent refractive liquid right here, right? All right, now let's step it up maybe a bit, right? So I'm gonna copy this red material there, copy there, and I'm gonna make this water maybe version 5. There we go. And I will apply this material over here. And we're gonna jump to translucency a bit, right? Because that's the fun part. There we go. So we're rendering this, I don't know, let's just say a cheap cherry juice, right? Or wine or something like that. And now we need to create a translucency, right? So we're introducing some kind of a chemical there or whatever, a different compound that's gonna have basically translucency, right? So to have translucency, first of all, what you need to do in the VRay material is to make the refraction on. That's the first thing. So obviously we have it on because we're creating a water material. So so basically what we need to do now is to choose a translucency model. So now for liquids, I would definitely 100% recommend to use hybrid model. For really hard surfaces like marble, plastic, glass, I would try to experiment with hard and hybrid. They work kind of in the same-ish way, but obviously using a bit of a different algorithm. So hybrid is gonna be, this is the most newest recent model, which works really well and physically looks quite accurate. Soft is, I wouldn't use the soft one unless you really want to experiment with this, but according to VRay documents, basically the soft model is just for compatibility issues with older VRay versions, right? And I mean older VRay versions like 1.5 or whatever, really old versions, right? So in this case, we're gonna keep this to hybrid. Bam. Now look what's happening there, right? Obviously my potato machine is just started to cry because obviously it is a bit harder to render, because obviously it is scattering the light rays, and it is basically what it is I'm gonna keep this simple. It's basically harder to calculate. It's more, your CPU is doing more calculations because this material just became a lot more complicated, right? And it does look quite tasty if you ask me. I would drink this. I don't know what it is, but I would drink this. In Lithuanian language, we call it kisielius. You wanna check it out, what is kisielius? Actually, I'm not gonna do it because I have no idea what I'm gonna find there, so I'm gonna leave it as is. So this material here, obviously, as you can see, has some translucency, right? And let's just call this kisielius because it's a tasty thing. Honestly, I'm just curious what's gonna... There you go. Some Lithuanian product. Bam! Something like that. Huh? Is it close? Yeah, it does look quite close. Something like this. There you go. There we go. There we go. Cool. Sweet. Sweet beans. We can make it maybe a bit more saturated, right? Bam. More of that kisielius. There we go. So obviously, this is not that obviously simple. What it is simple, as you just saw, but you know, if I'm gonna change to, I'm gonna show you how this is working, right? So for example, if I'm gonna change this to hard wax, obviously you're gonna see a completely different result because it's just the algorithm is a bit different, right? So I wouldn't recommend using hard wax because it does work quite well on marble, plastic, and glass, right? Sometimes even hybrid works really well with glass. Now, wax model, like I said, I'm not gonna be, you know, I wouldn't use this on a liquid material. So, and for example, soft, that's how the soft is gonna work. And obviously you can see that it's really, really soft as an effect, right? But it's goddamn slow to render, right? And it does give me a lot of noise and stuff. I'm not sure. It does give me a quite weird effect there as well, as you can see there. Maybe you're not spotting it, but that looks a bit weird. Now look at this, and now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna switch to none. Bam. So that's none with no translucency at all, right? And now I'm gonna switch to hybrid, right? There we go. So you're getting a lot of translucency in the object, and obviously you can, you know, manipulate this with, you know, that's gonna be really, really weird effects like a yogurt. There we go. So you're manipulating this with this color if you want to. I'm gonna cancel it. Maybe increase it even more lighter, right? There you go. If only my CPU would be faster, right? Jesus. All right, there we go. So we're getting something here. So if I'm going to increase this, sorry, decrease this to 0, bam, no effect at all. If I'm going to increase this to 1, full effect of the translucency, right? There you go. And for example, I can put this to 0. So it's going to become lighter. If I'm going to put this to 2, a lot more lighter. And this will react really similar to this number here. So 2, 4, 5, right? So this is at 5. So I'm going to put to 0, bam. And I'm going to put this to 5. Oops, sorry. I just pressed something. Oh, sorry, there you go, 1. So for example, I'm going to press this to 1 and I'm going to push this to 5. And as you can see how, you know, how lighter it gets. But obviously it's a bit of a different effect, but it will work in the same-ish way. -2, there you go. So we're blocking that effect by quite a bit. And obviously, you know, it's hard for me to go faster just because it is taking a lot of time to render. And obviously you can see, you know, what effects can you get, right? So honestly, I'm not gonna lie, this is starting to look more like a wax material. I will be creating a separate video about wax materials. So for example, now if I'm gonna put this to 06, I mean, honestly, guys, that looks like almost like wax. There we go. if you would delete those bubbles, that kind of looks like wax, honestly, if I'm not joking. Yep, that's kind of look like wax. So I'm gonna put this to 0 for now. Okay, and I'm gonna put this to 1, and this is the thickness that you can control. Now thickness is a really sensitive thing, right? So I did put 0 now, but if I'm gonna put 1, you can see that the lightness the scattering effect will decrease and increase. So be really careful what you're trying to achieve, right? So keep in mind this glass is almost like 50 centimeters diameter, right? So as you can see here, it does work in a different way, right? So for example, if you want to get something close to the liquid, I would bump these rookie numbers a bit up, right? Rookie numbers. So and light multiplier, obviously you can do that as well. Let me put this to 1 because we want to make this reflective, because it should be water or liquids. So I'm gonna put this to 5 for now because it's gonna take ages to render. And let's just decrease this effect. So you can decrease this effect by the color. You can decrease the color and check it out how the translucency is working, as you can see on the white material. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna keep that reddish material, but I can make this effect work less, right? So for example, I am putting now 2. So if I'm gonna put 1, you can see that how denser the imperfections or the molecules are getting, right? And how less visible my those spheres are, right? I wanted to say balls. Didn't. So spheres, yes, about spheres. So basically, if I'm gonna put this to 0, obviously that's gonna be completely transparent and everyone is gonna be happy. But if you're gonna put this to 1, that's gonna be less and less refractive. If you're gonna put this to 0.2, for example, you're gonna see more and more of it, and that's gonna become more like a liquid, right? There we go. So this juice is getting a bit more expensive. So, you could actually drink it. So, if you want to make this darker, you can. But, you're going to get a bit different effects, as you can see here. And I'm just going to press cancel this. And I'm going to press, maybe I want a bit more saturated. I'm not sure even. I'm not sure what kind of a drink I'm getting here. So let's just say I'm going to put 5. By the way, I wanna show one more thing. So these settings here, you can play around with them as well, right? So you have forward and backward coefficients. So the rays are gonna be acting a bit differently, right? So the rays are gonna come in and scatter in each and every direction, front and back, blah blah blah, right? So obviously these numbers are just numbers, so just keep that in mind, right? So obviously there is an explanation. I was talking about these in my I cannot remember now, glass or plastic. Honestly, I forgot. But the thing is, these are just numbers. And if you're getting the effect that you want, use that number. That's so simple, right? So if I'm going to put to 1, you can see that my material is getting a bit more, I don't know, more foggy, or it's really hard to say. If I'm going to put this to 0, you can honestly see the result from the light cache only, right? So 1, see the result, and 0, see it became more contrasty and more liquidy, or whatever you want to call it. So let's just say we're gonna keep this to 1 at the moment, and let's just say we're gonna keep scatter coefficient to 1, bam, and 0, 1 and 0. So you're seeing on the 0 default number, you're getting this a bit more crispier, nicer effect. So if I'm gonna switch these to 1 and 0, there you go, this is what you're getting. So as you can see, you have plenty of control with VRay as a translucency material, right? I mean, you can just go crazy, right, with it, and you can get really different effects. So keep in mind, this is rendering with translucency, fog color, reddish, or whatever it is. And we're getting this, I don't know, really, it looks kind of nice if you ask me. I think it works quite well. So now if we're gonna put this to 0 and 1, this is what we're getting. We're getting a more thicker drink or whatever it is, right? More like a Kisielus, okay? Like a punch. How is it called? I have no idea. So that's one approach. So 1-0, bam, right? Almost completely refractive, right? So look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna switch to none, bam. No effect at all, right? Now I'm gonna switch to hybrid again, bam. See how your glass lights up? And you can control even this bias if you want, bam, a darker, right? I'm gonna put this to 1, sorry, 0 and 1, and this is what you're getting, a thick, weird looking drink, right? And you can control this even in the middle, right? So 0.5, 0.5, there you go. You're getting something a bit different, something in between. So basically with these controls, scatters coefficient and forward and back coefficient, basically what's happening is your light rays, the scattering effect is going to be a bit different, right? Those rays are going to come in and come out in a different way, right? So the scattering effect, it's going to be a bit more randomized, right? So for example, if that's going to, for example, be 0, so that's going to be forward and backward coefficient, sorry, forward coefficient is if it's that's going to be 1, that's going to be basically backwards. So the ray is going to come in and it's not going to come out, right? Or vice versa, right? But like I always say, especially with VRay, right? These numbers are just numbers, right? So what, if you're looking for a particular result, right? If you're looking for a particular result in your material, you will make, the most, maybe in some ways, the most stupidest numbers, of your life, maybe, or whatever, but you're gonna get the right effect. So basically what I'm trying to say is, try to train your eye, right? So for example, even if I'm gonna switch the color to a bit more orangey, maybe. Ooh, I'm not sure what is that. I don't really like that color, no. I prefer the red color. So there you go. We have 0, bam, something like that, right? And don't get me wrong, it does look nice, right? So even if I'm gonna put this to 1 and 0, this is what I'm gonna get, right? So I'm changing, or for example, 0 there as well. So we're mixing it up a bit. So let me just put this to default. Okay, so 100, by the way, that was 1000, right? So 100 should be fine because that's 1 meter there, so it's carrying throughout the object. Now, another thing that you can play around this, so this is the main color, and now you have the backside color. So you can literally play around with this color as well. It will give you this, I'm not sure how to express this, but it will give you this some kind of like a scattering color that is gonna scatter inside of your object. So for example, it will be reddish, it will be this color, but the scattering, the deep effect is gonna be kind of purplish in my example. So if you want to make this obviously right, I would recommend you to just, try to make, hues something like along those lines, right? If darker, that effect is gonna go away, obviously. There you go. If you're gonna use something like that, you can't get really cool effects, right? So maybe a bit more warmish color scattering effect, for example, in this case, that one, or maybe lighter if you want to do so, right? Or maybe desaturate it a bit. So don't over exaggerate with that backside color, right? So as you can see here, if I'm going to render this region here, you're getting this some kind of warmish scattering effect. If I'm going to put this to completely red, obviously that red is just going to basically be overlapping and the effect is not going to be that strong. So the white, basically that's what how the scattering effect is going to look. As you can see, it's a bit more whitish, it's a bit more bland, right? But when I'm gonna start increasing the color, or maybe another color which is a bit more, maybe you know, maybe more brownish, sorry, more yellowish, or more more so reddish, something like that, right? So it's not gonna be that flat. So now let's just change this to the soft material that I said, you know, maybe not to use. But obviously, as you can see here with this hybrid material, you can go by 1 here, 0 there, and you will get that, you know, completely nice refraction. You can even see the end spheres there. But let me just double check one thing, guys. So I want to make this material like this, right? So I will remove this. I just want to do a test for myself here really quickly. So open that and select the bubbles and apply this material without any bump. Check it out how it's going to react. All right, so that's what I thought. So basically it is picking that bump map either way, right? So it's a bit annoying, but what I'm gonna have to do always for those bubbles is to apply the same material but without any bump, because obviously you will not have any bump on those bubbles, that's for sure, right? So obviously this is looking a lot better right now. So obviously I'm gonna have to do that. But you know, keep in mind that you're gonna have to apply, if you're applying a no bump. The thing is that I'm applying a bump map just because it's gonna look a bit more nicer, because on the flat surface it does look, I don't know, a bit boring to my eyes, if you ask me. Yeah, it does look quite boring, so I'm gonna keep the bump map because it's just gonna add a bit more interest to the water. There we go. And for the bubbles, I will be applying, yeah, there you go. So that's the correct approach. Because if I'm gonna apply these bubbles here, it is applying some kind of a bump map there, even if I'm not using it. So, and yeah, it does look really weird, right? So if I'm gonna apply on the bubbles the same material but without any bump, obviously this will be rendering correctly. So at the moment, you know, just keep that in mind, right? Obviously, if I would be creating a personal project, I would do this, but you know, for this tutorial purposes, that's what we're gonna do. So let's just say this is the material number 5, right? And let's just say now I want to create a bit of a different material by using a soft water. So there you go. For the soft water, you're getting a bit of a different calculation, a bit more softer calculation, as you can see there. But think of it as a different algorithm, obviously soft, and it says here water. But when you read about translucency on VRay, VRay translucency, there you go. So if I'm gonna check there, and there we go. So for example, I just want to make this clear, right? So there you go, soft water mode. This mode is mostly for compatibility with older VRay versions 1 point whatever, right? So but obviously VRay is not saying so, obviously, but there you go. Scatter coefficient specifies the amount of scattering inside of the object value of means raised b scattered in all directions. A value of 1 means array cannot change its direction inside the subsurface volume. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, right. So this doesn't give me any examples on or how it's gonna react. So that's what I'm always saying, guys. Always try to experiment with those settings, but obviously you need to know where to go, right? What to press. You will sort it out later on. But obviously I'm trying to make these obviously sorry for the long tutorials videos, but I'm trying to show you guys how to manipulate and play with these things, right? So for example, I just apply a soft model and it does work, you know, decently, completely well, unless I would need to, you know, put this to 4 or something like that, and I would get different effects, obviously, right? So I'm gonna go back, and that's the hybrid. There you go. So you can see that the hybrid gives us a bit more thicker, I don't know, nicer result. And if you go this to soft model, you can see that it is reacting a bit differently, right? And keep in mind, we're using the same settings here. And if I'm gonna switch this to hard, obviously you can see that this is looking even more different, right? Obviously this looks really weird. Please don't use this. Use either the hybrid, all right, or either the soft material there, okay? And obviously then you can experiment with these numbers here that you can get different effects and whatnot. So let me just render a bit of it. Honestly, by the way, let me just go back a bit. What I don't like about this soft model, which is working quite well, but as you can see, it gives these high hot pixels or whatever you want to call it. So let's just say I'm gonna go back. And I'm jumping now on a hybrid model. So now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna render this with so there you go. I'm not getting any artifacts, right? So 0, 1, so that's the default. So as you can see, I'm not getting any artifacts. When I'm switching to soft, as you can see, I'm starting to get these pixels, especially there and there and there. And it does look really weird, especially I don't have any bubbles there. I mean, honestly, I don't have any bubbles there. These are just white speckles that actually it does give us a weird result, and in a way it's quite cool. It looks like these are small bubbles, but they are not. So what about if we're gonna render something there? So we are getting some small whitish pixels, which, like I said, especially in animations, it can cause you a lot of issues in flickering and all of that kind of stuff. Now that looks really bad. Now that looks really bad. So like I said, don't try to, and VRay is outputting this as saying that this mod mostly compatibility with older VRay. And for the hybrid model, this is the most realistic SSS model. It's suitable for simulating skin, milk. So milk is a liquid, so we're quite Gucci, right? Fruit juice and other translucent materials, right? So hybrid material is in my understanding, and my suggestion is use it, all the time, unless you're creating a really hard surface materials like marble or wax, right? So let's just switch this to hybrid and keep everyone happy, right? Because it's getting a bit annoying. So let's just keep this material. So like I said, look, so another thing is forward and back for the coefficient controls the direction of scattering for a ray. A value of 0 means a ray can only go forward, okay, away from the surface. Okay, so it's gonna go inside of from the glass, inside of your juice, inside of the object. 0.5 means that the ray has an equal chance of going forward and backward, and what ray will be scattered backwards towards the surface, right? To the outside of the object, right? So in some cases, this might give you a desirable result, right? So 1 or 0, or 1 here, or 0, or 1 here. And obviously you can see that the result is getting different, right? But that's the thing, like I said, if it does give you realistic results, use it whatever number you want, right? And whatever color you want, it's up to you guys, right? As long as it looks realistic, okay? So let's leave this material for now. It kind of looks quite cool, honestly. This is quite simple. This is what was this? This was a different color, and now we're playing around with some translucency, right? So let's just try to play around. So let me just delete that guy for now. Doesn't work. So bam, there we go. Let's do this. So now let's go and experiment a bit more. So so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna apply the same material for now with bubbles. and water. So I'm gonna apply the same material for now. I'm gonna change the bubbles later on because we're gonna use we're not gonna use the bump map. So water or whatever, I'm just gonna call it water for now. And let's just try to experiment with this a bit more. So I'm gonna apply this guy here, right? And we're gonna press the interactive mode. There we go. And we're gonna try to play around with, let's just sec. We're gonna try to play around with some colors, right? So let us try to create something, I don't know, orangey. Oh, by the way, I will make this desaturated now. And let's just try to create something, yeah, something like that actually. Darker, darker. So you see how it's, you know, reacting. It's quite cool, right? So let's just do something along those lines and a bit more orangey maybe, something like that. Actually, that's starting to look like whiskey, right? And we can obviously, so this is, so when we are applying, sorry, the fog color to a darker color, it gets kind of really translucent, only almost like a wax material. As you can see, it's really thick, right? And this is really thin, right? So you're gonna see more refractions, right? And the color obviously can be saturated and desaturated to your liking there. And obviously this is gonna increase the effect of it. There you go, see how it's working. Bam, so we're getting a different effect here. So let's just keep this one because we want to get this kind of a whiskey effect or whatever. And let's just put this to 1, bam. All right, so we're trying to go somewhere with this. There we go. And let's just try to keep this color to a darkish, darkish reddish, something like that. There we go. All right, so put this to 3. Sorry, oops, that's a bit too much. 0.3, maybe 0.15. There we go. And let's just put this color a bit more to the yellowish side. There we go. And let's just try to push this color a bit. I think that's gonna be fine for now. Let us increase the color there. Let's put 0, 1 and 0 there. So as you can see, we're getting a bit of a different effect here. Honestly, the colors, playing around with the colors, I think is obviously really important, but you can get whatever effect you're trying to get. So this is completely red. All right, there we go. So something maybe like that. Okay, let's just try 2, 3. So the scattering effect will be a lot stronger. There we go. So almost it's starting to look like a T or something like that. So basically, I'm gonna try to obviously wrap this up a bit faster, but you can, you know, sit around and experiment with those materials as long as you want. But what I'm trying to say is, let me just try to copy this for now because I'm gonna keep the same-ish material either way. So if I'm gonna select my bubblies by that guy, there you go. So now if I'm gonna pick a region here somewhere, it should work a bit more correctly. So what I'm gonna try to say is, try to play around with fog color, with the fog multiplier, with the bias, and all of these translucency settings, right? Just to get that nice effect, right? Yeah, it does look like a black tea or something like that. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? So for example, I'm gonna put this to 1, sorry, 0, this to 1. So now we're gonna get a bit of a different effect. So let me just put this that way. 1, 0, and 0, and 1, and 0. All right, so let's just put this to 0. Okay, 2. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You can get a lot of different nice effects, right? Saturate a bit. Obviously, that fog color there is taking into action. Put it to 1. Put it to 2. And what we can do with the refraction, reduce the effect there. And honestly, guys, just try to play around with colors and these settings a bit. But obviously, I gave you the keys where to start and what to what to get. And obviously, it is looking like a T or something like that here. Obviously, like I said, you need to get a reference image or something like that and try to manipulate and experiment with the effect that you want to get, right? So if the object doesn't have any translucency, just you can kill the translucency completely, right? So 0 there. Saturate this color. So there you go. You can get really different effects here, right? There you go. This is some weird ring there. So anyways, this is almost starting to look like Coca-Cola. Anyways, so I'm just gonna basically cancel this for now. So obviously I showed you how to play around with your translucency materials with VRay node, right? So you have diffuse, right, which is gonna be blackish. Reflection, which is going to be quite reflective, right? From 150 to 200, that's more than enough for a water. Now log the IOR. Refraction is going to be 1.33 IOR, and the refraction should be whitish, 250 or so. And then you're going to start playing around with the fog color, with the fog multiplier, with the bias and all. Obviously change this to the hybrid model, and then you're going to start playing around with scatter coefficient, backward coefficient, but obviously by default 0 and 1 will work just fine, but obviously in different situations this will look a bit more different, right? So obviously I'm rendering this on my slow CPU, and I'm trying to render this at 1.5K. So, and as you can see, this default option does give you more thickness to your drink, to your liquid, right? As you can see here, it does give you more thickness, right? So when you change this, right? When you change this to 1, it's gonna give you obviously a different look and etc, etc. If you're gonna change this to 0, it's gonna give you a completely different effect, right? So your liquid is gonna be more thinner, right? So this is gonna be more thicker. So 0 and 1. So this drink here, this liquid is gonna be more thicker, as you can see here. And then you can go here and increase the translucency effect if you want to, which is obviously gonna be a bit slower to render. There we go. But usually 1 works quite well. I'm gonna keep this to 0. Sorry, I'm gonna keep this 1 and 0. So it's gonna be a bit different. So let's just say forward, backward coefficient 0, right? So if we're gonna go to VRay forward, backward control. So we're using now 0, right? So if we understand forward, so controls that. So the value of 0 means the ray can only go forward, away from the surface. So the ray is gonna go from the surface in, and theirs is gonna scatter out, and it's not gonna scatter out outside, right? So it's kind of it kind of makes sense now when you're trying to test it out, right? So when you're testing it out and you are reading these, and that's how I usually learn, about VRay. First, I create a dummy model or something like that. Then I create a studio scene, and then I open some kind of a VRay documentation, for example, and I'm trying to render this as much as possible, right? So, for example, I'm reading this now, right? Forward, back. So we're using 0, right? So we're using 0 there. So it means the ray can only go forward, away from the surface, inside of the object, right? So that's what are we getting here now, right? So the ray is coming inside of the object and is scattering everything there, right? Now, for example, if we're gonna put 05, that's gonna be somewhere in the middle, back and forward. And if that's gonna go 1, that's gonna be only the rays are gonna be basically scattering outside of your water material out, right? So the light is not gonna scatter that much into your object, right? So 0 is gonna scatter that quite well. And then again, like I said, test it out. It depends what kind of object do you have, what kind of material do you have in your hands, and all of that kind of stuff, right? And obviously the scatter coefficient there specifies the amount of scattering inside of the object. The value of 0 means the rays will be scattered in all directions, right? Which we are using at the moment is 1, which is not the case. And 1 means a ray cannot change its direction inside the subsurface volume. So if we are gonna put this to 0, obviously we will get a bit of a different effect, as you can see here. So the effect is getting more thicker, right? If we are gonna put this to obviously the effect is really nice, as you can see here. It does work really nice, right? Especially with those bubbles there. Yeah, I really like this material, by the way. If 1, that's gonna be a bit more thinner water, as you can see there, or whatever it is, right? So as you can see, it's a lot thinner, it's more refractive. And if we're gonna get this to 0, it's gonna be more thicker, right? There we go. And if we're gonna change this to 1, it's gonna get even thicker, right? Because the ray's direction is changing, the scattering direction is changing as well. So really experiment with these settings. They are really easy to use, right? So 1 and 0, bam, what we're getting here. And 0 and 0 is giving you this different effect, which is looking really nice, if you ask me. So I'm gonna leave this at this point. You can play around yourself. Obviously it shows you how. And let me just sorry guys, just open this guy. There you go. And I will delete this map there, and I want to apply this on the bubbles just in case. Bubbles, there you go. All right, so we're using now different same material. So let me just check how it's working. There you go. Yeah, and it's working perfectly fine without any bumps on the map, right? There you go. That's just perfect. Just looks beautiful. Really nice material here. So obviously, like I said, all of these things take time, and obviously you can create presets, material libraries for your liquid materials. If you spend 1 hour or 30 minutes playing around with the material, obviously try to create a material library by just clicking new material library and just adding the materials in whatever way you want. So so this is water version 6, right? Or liquid, whatever. I'm just gonna rename those later on. Now we're gonna start playing around with another material called fast SSS. Okay, so this is gonna be a bit of a different approach, but in the same way, quite cool. So I'm gonna use this, by the way, I'm gonna use the same thing. Bump is 05, and I'm gonna put bump to 5 and put this guy in here and apply this guy there. And honestly, I'm gonna apply on the bubbles as well, just for now, okay? So I'm gonna call this sorry, liquid, so water v6. So I'm gonna copy that name there. I'm gonna call it liquid. All right. And now what you need to know is nothing, honestly, about this material. You just need to experiment with this at the same approach as this one, right? So, but what fast SSS has is basically a lot more control. You have, you know, overall color, diffuse color, scatter color, you know, the distance as well, the IOR, the fact, blah blah blah, a lot of different objects, and obviously single scattering effects as well. You have none, simple, ray trace, solid for reflections, ray traced, refractive as well. I mean, they all work a bit differently, and one is faster, and ray traced, refractive, solid. They are the slowest ones, obviously. And then you have scatter GI, so without it's going to be slower, but you know, less accurate. With it, it's going to be a lot more, well, basically slower, right? So you're adding more to calculations. I'm tired of talking, honestly. Okay. So let's just create a preset, which is, sorry, already created, which is called orange juice. Let's start from the bottom, right? So orange juice, right? So straight here from the default preset, I'm gonna apply this guy there. Okay. And for the bubbles, do I have it on the bubbles? Yeah, I have it. Okay, cool. So what I'm gonna do now is really easy, obviously. So I'm gonna press interactive rendering, and this is what we're getting here now. And honestly, if you ask me, that looks just shit. Okay, so just like shit, basically. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it looks horrible now, right? So now look what's gonna happen. I'm not gonna change anything there. So I'm gonna change this number a bit to 033, right? Just in case, right? Just so I'm gonna be sleeping better tonight. So obviously you can see that scatter coefficient fog color has been changed because by default it's scatter radius. And that's usually gonna be for solid surfaces, right? Like marble, wax, and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna switch to fog again. And what we need to change now is so options. When you see options here, you need to change this from simple to ray trace solid. That's what you're gonna see now. And now I'm gonna change to refractive. Bam, there we go. You can see a bit of a different effect here, right? Solid, you don't see the spheres. Simple, you don't see anything. None, nothing at all, right? So now I'm going to change to refractive because obviously our material will be refractive, right? All right, so we're going to try to get this orange juice working a bit better, right? So obviously you can see that nice fog effect there and all of that kind of stuff. So this orange juice to my eyes looks really, really thick, right? So it looks kind of, don't get me wrong, it doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look good. So scatter radius. Let's try to scatter this by, let's just say 10 centimeters. Bam, there we go. So we're getting, you know, a lighter scatter radius. So obviously it's up to us if we want to keep it. So let's just try to bring this back a bit more to maybe 5 or 4 because it was a bit too much. Now the phase function, honestly, sometimes it's gonna work better with the with the negative result. Sometimes it's gonna be working with the positive, but obviously you can see here how it is reacting, right? So obviously this is way too much, and the thing is 1 is the maximum one. So if I'm gonna go to 0.9, obviously you see that it's gonna start working again, right? So, but it is becoming darker and darker, right? So if I'm gonna put to -5, it really depends what you're trying to achieve, obviously. So -5, as you can see, that's how it's working, right? And it's working quite well. If I'm gonna put this to 0, honestly, not a lot of change, and not a lot of things are changing, right? So let's just try to manipulate with the scatter coefficient color. So let's just try to make this dark for your sake. There you go. So this is what you're getting. And now this is what you're gonna get now. So basically the scatter coefficient color is really light now. All right, there we go. We're getting a lighter, cheaper orange juice. I'm gonna make it a bit darker and maybe a bit more yellowish. I'm not a fan of this color though. No, that's like a carrot juice. Really hard to get that orange color. Something like that, I think. Alright, let's just press cancel and leave the color that it was. And diffuse amount, basically that's gonna be you know, the amount of diffuse you want to output through this material, which is obviously at default is 0. And if you want to output, so that's the diffuse color of this diffuse color, right? So for example, you're just making it stronger, stronger, and stronger as a whole global value, whatever you want to call it. So let's just say I'm going to use 0.5. And that's not gonna work for our orange juice, so leave that for now. Overall color, I wouldn't touch this overall color because it's just not gonna do any justice to you. It's just gonna tint your whole object, well, as a whole object basically. So face function, blah blah blah, right? So now the specular amount, you can really play around with it if you want to, but because we are creating a liquid, I would leave the specular amount to 1. Now specular glossiness, same thing. It's you know, we're trying to create a liquid there, so we will keep this at 1 because we're gonna get these sharp reflections there, right? Now specular subdivs, I would keep this to 8 because I don't see the point of increasing this unless you get some artifacts or something like that. And now the last thing, well, almost the last thing, sorry, I want to check is this scatter GI by him. So scatter GI, you will start getting a bit of a more accurate, realistic result, as you can see there. And because the DGI is going to be scattered throughout of your object here. But one thing to mention is that scatter GI, well, what I wanted to say is basically it's going to take longer to render, right? So don't overcomplicate things. It's just going to be longer to render. So sorry, let me just select my bubbles there and remove this guy and add on those bubbles. Now the bubbles are kind of giving me some kind of a weird effect, if you ask me. I'm not sure why, but I'm not gonna play around with those bubbles at the moment. Honestly, I could apply just, you know, a V-Ray translucency material, but I'm not sure if that's gonna fix them. So let me just try to do that honestly here. All right, so actually I think my glass material is causing this issue. So let us select our glass material and completely remove the fog color. So I'm gonna be copying this color for now and removing it completely, 0. There we go. So actually, in some way, the fog material of the glass is reacting with the material of the fastest assess, and it's giving me this greenish tint, which is really, really weird if you ask me. And I would definitely start playing around with some V-Ray translucency materials in getting the orange juice. So I will be creating something like that, obviously, for you guys in those 25 materials that I'm going to be creating. But obviously, you can see that the fast SSS is acting quite weirdly, because if I'm going to copy this color again to my glass material, you can see that it is giving me some kind of a greenish tint bleed into my orange juice, right? And I'm not really liking that. Honestly, it looks kind of weird. And yeah, I would put this to desaturated at the moment, right? But obviously I'm not gonna get that fog color anymore. So if I'm gonna render that region there, so as you can see, this orange juice, it's you know, it's quite okay. It's not that bad, but like I said, if you want to get, you know, realistic results, you have to really play around with the. Like I said, these presets are just for, you know, if you pick orange juice preset, it's not gonna work, you know, perfectly. You know, it's not gonna work perfectly. You're gonna have to go there and tweak this a bit. So for example, play around like that, like for example, 0.2, 0.1, 5, 6, 8, 50. You know, play around with what can you get from it? 20, 10, bam, there we go, right? So for example, 10, 6. And for the color, fall color as well, you can control the fall color if you want to. For example, this color there, so you can apply a bit more yellowish maybe. And honestly, you just need to put this thing to the test, right? So basically, glass of orange juice, right? Now you have a lot of different orange juices, and all of these images are quite saturated and looks kind of, you know. So for example, you know, this is this glass of juice looks quite expensive, blah blah blah. This is just a really bad. This is a really bad example to try to replicate orange juice. You should try to find something like a real photo or something at least like that, which is a studio scene, but it looks like this is a realistic approach, right? So for example, as you can see there, we're not getting that effect anywhere to this effect, right? Obviously, we have more light in this scene, as you can see, but our orange juice is not looking completely fine. So let me just play around with it a bit. So let me just make it darker. There we go. So lighter. So that should be a bit more yellowish, right? So there we go. So let me try to play around with this guy. So there we go. All right, so it's just one more thing that is getting a bit too dark, right? So the diffuse amount. So let me just copy this color to the diffuse amount, paste, and let's just put this to 2.5. All right, 0.5. All right, so we are getting closer, but obviously you can see that you need to play around with it because these presets are quite, well, I'm not gonna say bad, but you know, they are there, but you have to play around with it a bit more, right? So the refraction depth, you can play around with it as well, but obviously in this situation, it's not gonna do a lot of justice, even if I'm gonna put 5 or 10, because we just have one solid piece of glass and another solid piece of liquid, right? So phase function, if I'm gonna copy this number, right, and gonna try to experiment to -1, So this is what we're getting with -1. Sorry, 1. There we go. So with 1, we're getting this, and we're going lower, we're going to get something like that, right? So obviously we can see that even -1 is working better than, for example, 0, right? So the phase function is going to be doing something with the ray direction in the same way, right? So -1. So -1, basically the ray is gonna come in and scatter inside of the object, and +1, I assume the ray is gonna go outside of the object into the exterior, and that's how it's gonna work, right? So radius, we can use 8 to make it more watery or whatever you want to call it. I don't think 8 is gonna work. So for color, we're gonna try to apply a bit of a I don't know, yellowish color. So let's check the, so it is whitish yellowish on the side. Let's just check that out. Maybe a bit more desaturated, something like that. Overall color, same thing. You can try to experiment with this, copy, paste, or just drag and drop. So that's becoming more like a T. So it looks like it wants to be desaturated a bit. All right, I'm just curious how it's gonna react when I'm gonna be rendering it. Okay, that's how it's reacting. So so this is not gonna work for us. So we're gonna keep this as white as possible. The IOR is fine. Now the scale. So the scale is gonna be basically putting more lightness to the scatter effect, right? So keep that in mind. So the scale is gonna be working a bit more differently. It's gonna be adding your translucency effect more globally, right? So for example, scatter radius in centimeters. So basically, you're specifying the distance from your, how far basically the light is gonna scatter into your object. If it's 6 centimeters, that's gonna be 6 centimeters. So maybe from there to there, right? If it's gonna be 100, it's gonna scatter throughout and blah blah blah, etc, etc, etc. But if you're gonna be applying scale to, for example, 2, 3, or 4, the overall global result is gonna be, more bigger. Basically, the lightness is gonna be more bigger, right? So even if I'm gonna apply this on my bubbles, not sure if it's gonna work, but let's check it out. So orange juice here. So obviously it looks like this is getting a bit more light, a lot more light. So keep in mind that this material is really sensitive to a light, right? So if you have a directional light, this object will become more lighter. I mean, this material will become more lighter. Sometimes you can put a light and just include this glass with the orange juice just to become a bit more lighter, but you can always try to play around with these settings as best as possible, right? So let's just say I'm going to put this to 3, bam, 2. Now it's a bit annoying when light cache is calculating it. It's thus showing the translucency effect, but it doesn't show really, what kind of a color is going to be in the end. So you cannot really, play around more with this single scatter subdivs and refraction depth and GI. That should be on. So these ones are kind of gonna remain the same. Now reflection depth, that's gonna be the same. Trace reflections, the same. Speculars and all of that kind of stuff for liquids, that's gonna be same. Specular colors, now you can change the reflection color if you want to, but I wouldn't recommend doing that too much, right? You kind of want to leave this to white. Now the most important things are going to be the scale, the IOR. Obviously of the liquid water is going to be 0.3 or 0.33, doesn't matter. Now the scale, you will control the scale, you will control the and basically the majority of controls that you're going to be playing around is these ones, right? So try to ignore all of this for now. you just need to change this to ray trace refractive, because obviously your object is refractive. And then you have to play around with all of this diffuse and subsurface scattering layers. So these are the most important options here, and obviously the scale, right? And the other one, which is I think the most important thing, is the ray trace refractive. But overall, this is what you should be playing with, is these colors over here, right? So let me just copy this color and make this a bit maybe more yellowish. Okay, so 0, 2, 5, 4. Let's just put this to 5. Point 9. Okay, so all right, guys. So I hope this made a bit sense. So I will cancel this interactive rendering. I'm gonna copy this really fast, and I'm gonna show you a couple more presets that you can play around with. So for example, this was the orange juice, right? So I'm gonna play interactive again. So this was the orange juice. By the way, this is the preset here that you're getting, right? And like I said, it does look nice, but you have to play around with it a bit more. And by the way, don't forget to keep this to refractive, right? So if I'm gonna apply this guy there, sorry, this guy there, so we're getting a bit of a different effect there. Obviously, it's a bit more refractive and all that. If we're gonna apply a new material there with an orange juice preset, obviously you can see that the effect is a bit more different. You know, just play around with the color a bit, maybe more reddish or more yellowish. It really depends what kind of you know, color you want to try to get, but darker, just try darker. Ooh, that's really intense. So for example, that's your orange juice or whatever it is, right? So really play around with these presets. They are really nice, but you just need to tweak a couple of things, because first of all, it's gonna come in with you know, solid or simple preset mode, scattering mode. You have to play around with refractive or reflective or something like that. So for example, that's one. Let's create another one, which is water. There we go. So water clear. Obviously you can play around with some colors and all that kind of stuff. So diffuse color, for example, I just try to play around with a bit and put this to 50, 2, and you know, you can get things like that as well. So basically, you know, your because water, what it does is basically increasing the scale dramatically, right? Increasing the scale dramatically, and basically the scattering effect is not even working anymore. It's more like water, right? But just please don't create water materials with this fast SSS. Don't do that, right? Create VRay material node and then create water material. I showed you how to do that. That's really simple. So you know, if I'm gonna put 2 or 1, you're gonna get different effects of water, and you can get this this water effect quite easily with VRay material as well. Just keep that in mind, right? So we're kind of getting the same thing as I was showing you before, right? And obviously you have the scattering effect there. So play around. Honestly, this is quite easy to play around. So just switch to refractive and play around with these settings there. So clear, what is that? I'm not sure. I have no clue. Potato cream. So it might be cream there. but obviously we're not going to be talking about creams. Ketchup. So that's ketchup. There we go. We really need that bump map into the ketchup, right? Bump. Come on, there we go. We can see some bump map. It looks like ketchup, but yeah, I don't know, something like that, right? Like I said, play around with these settings a bit, but honestly, in my opinion, the most easiest way and maybe the most fun way to create liquids is basically just using a simple VRay material and playing around with these translucency settings if you really need to, right? You can even create orange juice and stuff like that. So I will be creating those materials for you guys. I'm gonna be creating, I think, 15 or 10 materials, maybe 12 materials with liquids, and obviously it's gonna be 25 materials in total, right? But I'm gonna be doing half of the wall materials and half of liquid materials for you guys to choose from and check it out how I did it, right? So you will be able to obviously support my channel and all of that kind of stuff. And by the way, by supporting my channel, guys, please, if you can, like and subscribe, because when you're liking my videos, it's helping me with the YouTube algorithm, and you know, people will be able to find me a bit sooner. And obviously the last thing I want to say is try to share if you can, because I'm trying to reach as much people as possible just to help out a bit to understand VRay in a more you know, simpler way than others think. So yeah, guys, honestly, thank you very much for watching my videos, for supporting my channel, and you know, if you can support me even more a bit, so you know, try to go to my website, 3Ws romasnoreika.com and you can buy there you know, maybe one of my scenes, maybe my project scenes or something like that, or a model or something like that, just to, you know, basically support my channel. Because like I said, I am doing full-time job at the moment still, and I'm recording these videos in the evening, so obviously in the on the weekends and in the evening. So obviously I'm using my own electricity, my time and all that kind of stuff. So but honestly, I want to obviously reach as much people as possible and help them to understand VRay and rendering CGIs in general. So please, if you can, if you find my videos, my courses, my lessons useful, please try to, you know, obviously consider supporting me. So thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day. Stay chilled and see you in my next video, guys. Thank you very much.